The San Jose Sharks have hope, but are the rest of the Pacific basement dwellers lost at sea? This is the Locked On NHL's Pacific Division playoff hopefuls, maybe, probably basement roundtable preview.
This is the Locked On Podcast Network's 2024 NHL season preview. Your team every day.
Hello, my name is JD Young, host of the Locked On Sharks podcast. Today, I am with Erica of Locked On Kraken, Jess of Locked On Flames, and Jason of Locked On Ducks, where we cover your team every day. Of course, you can find all of our podcasts and Locked On NHL wherever you get podcasts and watch on YouTube. Friends, it has been a very busy summer this off season. I know all of our teams have been most of our teams have been active in free agency and doing stuff with the draft. So let's start as we are in hope season. Erica, let me start with you. Why is this optimism around the Kraken this year?
Last year's over. So there you go. I think that the Seattle Kraken really slipped last year. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The team, I mean, even if you put the injuries on the shelf, just didn't quite compete the way that is the expectation, especially after being able to make it to the second round of the playoffs. That being said, we did see some moves in free agency on day one. 14 years of Seattle Kraken history signed in one day. And I think there's still a little concern about whether the terms and the amount spent is right, but it was a move in the right direction, or a move, I guess, in some direction. We'll find out soon enough. And that is in and of itself pretty big. There's still a lot of question marks with the Seattle Kraken, but from being at training camp for the last 2 days, I think that it really is about turning the page. New head coach in Coachella Valley, our AHL team, the former AHL head coach Dan Bylsma coming over to the Seattle Kraken. And, it seems like the new coaching staff really means business. And so hopefully that will translate throughout the regular season.
All right, Jess, there's been a lot of turnover with the Flames. The Flames kind of feel like a team that might be trying to figure out if they're going to retool this thing or if they're going to rebuild this thing. Optimism for the Flames other than Dustin Wolf.
It's a young team now. I think that, the biggest move was them trading Jacob Markstrom. That kind of set the tone of what direction they really want to go in, because like you said, Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar, who has less than 100 NHL games under his belt, are projected to be the goaltenders. And I don't necessarily think that is a Stanley Cup playoff team.
I mean, we kind of know the Flames are that team that they've been kind of wandering the desert, especially the last couple seasons, and they're, I think, kind of in the early stages of trying to figure out what they are. So, I mean, yes, they're a young team, and you have Dustin Wolf and like Matt Coronado. There's going to be something to be optimistic about, right? Not just like
absolutely.
Yeah, this isn't 23-24 San Jose Sharks, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have just kind of put their hopes and beliefs in these young children, and I think that's beautiful. I hope they don't project onto them, though, because we don't need to see any of that.
All right, Jason, I know the Ducks were very quiet in free agency, but they've been drafting very high recently. They have a ton of young guys making an impact. You have Cutter Gauthier, is going to be his full rookie season. Leo Carlson, and you have sweet new sweaters. Is this the year the Ducks can start to finally do something with everything?
There's a little bit of hope. I know that there are still some fans that are frustrated that GM Pat Verbeek did say, and I quote, "We are looking to get a top 6 forward and a top 4 defenseman." End quote. Did any of that happen during the offseason? I'm thinking of a number, JD, between 1 and no, which is exactly what happened. I mean, the additions the Ducks made are leaving some fans scratching their heads, to say the least. Yes, they picked up Robbie Fabry. They picked up Brock McGinn, which is fine. They got some pieces. They picked up someone else that Erica might be familiar with, Brian Dumoulin. So there's some pieces, but they're not exactly going to move the needle all too much. That being said, the health of all the rookies is going to be important. Leo Carlson expected to play a full season finally this season. Mason McTavish hopefully playing a full game this season. Trevor Zegras went into camp with a new attitude, a new outlook, a new hairdo, by the way, which harkens back to the 90s for some reason. Mullet power for Trevor Zegras now. But I know it's kind of a cliche that health is going to be important for every team, but the Ducks were one of the most injured teams last season, to the point that you saw some players that fans were going, "Who's this guy? Who's this guy?" Are these guys that are full-time NHLers? And they played a ton of games for the Ducks last season. So maybe it's up to the rookies to finally take that step forward. And I think it is about that time.
Speaking about let the kids play in San Jose, that is the recipe right now. The Sharks, Mike Grier had himself an offseason after a terrible, no good, very bad 2023-2024 season where the Sharks were one of the worst teams in modern NHL history. You were rewarded with your efforts with a new savior in Macklin Celebrini, who signed his ELC and has already been dominating in training camp. You have Will Smith, who was the 4th overall pick in the 2023 draft, entering the fray. The Sharks were active in free agency, getting Tyler Toffoli to add to the mix. And then the cherry on top, they went out and traded for Askarov from the Nashville Predators. The Sharks right now have the best prospect pool in the entire NHL, and I will fight people on this. There's a lot of hope in San Jose because of the team has not had any direction for the past several years. And with Mike Grier, he has turned this thing around in 2 years. And while this team is not going to be very good this year, you can see a path to this being a good, sustainable winning hockey team over the next few seasons once Celebrini and Smith and Dickinson and Askarov, once these guys start getting their legs under it, this team is going to be a young, fun, fast, gritty team. And it is going to be, the future is teal for a reason. So, while this is great from the forward, this year, though, I think for our 4 of our teams here are going to be a struggle still, maybe when it comes to points and trying to kind of rack up where they are at in the Pacific Division. So let's look at what FanDuel projects for these teams to be in the Pacific. The Seattle Kraken over under 87.5, the Flames at 81.5, the Ducks at 72.5, and the Sharks at 64.5. Let's start with Erica. 87.5. Where do you taking the over under? Does that feel about fair?
It feels about fair. I think although I'm cautious coming into this season, I am definitely more optimistic. So I think that it's definitely within reach. There obviously are things that in a first handful of days through main training camp that are yet to be seen. Who's going to be the number 1 goaltender comes to mind. I don't think we have Joey Decord fighting for an NHL spot. I think it's a matter of him perhaps fighting for the starting spot with Philip Grubauer. But if you look at, I mentioned, the free agency, we have Chandler Stevenson and Brandon Montour coming over, long contracts, again, contracts that the fan base, rightfully so, is curious about. And without question, on paper, the Seattle Kraken are better with those 2 players coming into this season. I think also you talk about the youths, both JD and JD squared, if you will. You talked about the youths, and I think that it's not a guarantee, but I think there can be a good chance that some of the offense that we need to reach and to get that over is going to come from some younger players. I'm thinking Shane Wright. I'm thinking Matty Beniers getting more settled in. Riker Evans on the defensive side, but more puck movement. Montour, Riker Evans, players like that, I think are going to help where, again, putting, if we can, injuries on the shelf, the Seattle Kraken just couldn't move the puck successfully, had trouble entering the zone, were getting stuck, trying to exit the zone, and just weren't particularly good in those particular areas. And I think that Dan Bilesma wanting to play fast gives me hope that we can reach over that prediction.
Jess, the Flames, it's 81.5. I don't know about you, but I'm taking the under on that. I think this Flames team is not very good, to be honest. Where do you stand? Do you think it's fair, over, under? Yeah.
I think it's generous. So
Generous.
I would hammer the under here, just because, I mean, the amount of turnover this team has had in the last 18 months alone is significant. They went from one of the best penalty kills to, I don't even want to think about it, but they have been humbled, and I think it's going to be difficult. They're going to have to take their medicine, but I mean, it'll all be worth it in the end, maybe.
Yeah, I think shaky goaltending can undo a lot. And the Flames, while they're, again, Dustin Wolf, there's a lot of hope in Dustin Wolf. Devin Cooley, who's great story and stuff, doesn't kind of scream a lot of confidence. Dan Vladar, same thing, who struggles to stay healthy. Yeah, they can play great in front of him, but as someone who's watched a lot of shaky goaltending the past couple seasons, the key to tanking shaky goaltending. So, Jason, is this the year where the Ducks, again, 72.5, or do we see them start to kind of maybe start to at least attempt to be a competitive team, at least through the trade deadline? Is 72.5 over, under? Where are you going?
How dare they? 72? Are you kidding? I'm taking the over all day, every day, 365 and a quarter days of the year. I have contended that the Ducks are going to be at least 15 points better this season than they were last season, which would put them at, if my math is correct, 74 points. So that puts me on the over on that. But even I think that's a little bit low. I have them in the high 70s this season, with a new coaching staff, with a new outlook, with a new rebranding. All of those things do make a difference for the Anaheim Ducks. And especially if you can get a full season of Trevor Zegras. Yes, there was a lot of talk. Oh, Zegras this. He should be traded here. He should be traded there. He didn't play that many games. He almost missed the entire season last year. That's why you didn't hear a lot of positive about Trevor Zegras, as he was out almost the entire time. And when he did play, he wasn't 100% at all. So if you can get a fully healthy Trevor Zegras, he could be back leading the Ducks in points and goals this season. And I haven't talked about him, but Cutter Gauthier has a certain confidence about him, a certain, I don't want to say arrogance, but there's just something about Cutter Gauthier that when he walks into a room, you could tell that he's already there because he exudes confidence. There was a game that he played in the rookie faceoff last weekend where he had a blistering shot that must have went 250 miles per hour. I'm kidding, not that fast, only 220. But he's got one of the best shots out of all the rookies outside of Macklin Celebrini that was there at the rookie faceoff. So I would say take the over on that one all day long.
For the Sharks here, it does feel a little high, to be honest. 64.5. Last year, they only had 47 points. That would be a jump of almost 20 points in a full season. As well, I do expect the Sharks to be better and more competitive. I would still take a slight under on that, just because 20-point jump in the standings. And yes, I know that team was historically bad. And if this team just goes to be normally bad, you're going to see them be a much more competitive team. But rookie head coach, you have the franchise is basically on the shoulders of two teenagers. I think that's a lot to expect from them this season. So I will take the under on that. We will take the over on how long this podcast is going to run and talk about the biggest off-season additions and some breakout candidates and what happens if your team misses the playoffs. So we'll get to that here in just 1 minute. If you want to go catch an NHL game, NFL game, NBA game, whatever is your cup of tea, you need to check out Game Time. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have curated deals to make it life easier to find the best prices on game seats. You can view your seats before you buy because there's nothing worse than getting to an event and realizing my seats stink. So with Game Time, they take the guesswork out of getting tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL, LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, we are back. Of course, thank you guys for making it Locked On NHL your first listen, watch, whatever it is. For your second listen, go check out any of our podcasts. We do a good job covering the team 5 days a week. And some of our teams have hope and optimism, and some of them are the Calgary Flames. So this offseason, sorry, Jess. This offseason, what do you think is the single most important thing your franchise did? We'll go through these quick. Erica, biggest move, the most important move for the Kraken this offseason.
I mean, I think it really is hands down bringing up that coaching staff, at least part of it, from the AHL and the Coachella Valley Firebirds to the Seattle Kraken. Disco Dan Bilesma already getting after it in the first handful of days. I've said on Locked On Kraken over really the last 2 training camps that the fatigue that we see in October, November, December has to be fixed in training camp. And it looks like Dan Bilesma and company are willing to do that. So I have to go with coaching for this one.
Jess, the biggest addition to the Flames this offseason.
Their willingness to let the kids play. I think that that's been a big challenge in the past for the Flames. And it's just nice to see them take this clear direction and allow this opportunity to be there for a bunch of these kids.
All right, Jason. I know, again, quiet off season, but biggest addition.
I got one. Naming a captain. I know it's not an addition because they didn't make any this season, but finally having a captain after a couple seasons. Radko Gudas is going to lead the future of the Ducks, and this could be a Niedermeyer situation where you had an older captain and help groom the next captains, a la Ryan Getzlaf. So fingers crossed, in a couple of seasons, Ducks will be back in the playoffs.
All right. I think for the Sharks, it's pretty easy. You found your franchise center, Macklin Celebrini, with the first pick of the draft. I know they added pieces like Tyler Toffoli, who's going to be a huge piece, but this is why you lost all those games last season, was to get yourself in a position to get Macklin Celebrini. And Celebrini is going to help change the culture in San Jose. It's been a lot of losing, especially since Joe Pavelski left. And while I don't think, Celebrini is expected to be Joe Pavelski right now, I would not be surprised if he is the captain here in the next couple seasons, especially with the injuries at Logan Gutierrez. But you found your franchise center in Macklin Celebrini. You can now kind of, everything else fits around him. So I think for a very busy offseason, again, Macklin Celebrini was that crown jewel. So I know there's still excitement. There's players that maybe are going to take that next step. Let's go around the horn here and discuss some of those. So, Erica, I know you have a lot of guys. Matty Beniers, he had a great rookie season, kind of fell apart last year. You have Shane Wright, we've been waiting for him to kind of make his debut. Who do you think is going to be the breakout guy for the, or it could be defenseman? Because I know you love yourself a defenseman.
I do. That's right. So you should probably get on that, JD, or the Shark should. But anyway, I think, the obvious answer really is Shane Wright, not just because everyone's been waiting and, he was such a high coveted prospect that then fell into the Seattle Kraken. But I really want to go not about the storylines, but about the work. He's put in work during rookie training camp as a leader. In the offseason, even the way he was talking about the approach to the offseason, the approach to the upcoming season, it sounded like someone who was determined to make the NHL. And then we don't have a lot of size on the Seattle Kraken. Matty Benier is just talking about how he's working so hard to put on pounds. Berkeley Catton needs to size up. We talked about that last week on the show. And then you have a player like Jagger Firkus, also very skilled offensively, but won't cut it if they can't beef up. Shane Wright has gotten bigger, he's gotten smarter, he's gotten more mature, and he's determined to make the NHL. And that is exactly the kind of young player that we need to infuse the bloodline of the Seattle Kraken.
All right, Jess, who do you think is the breakout player for the Flames this season?
I think it's Dustin Wolf, as a surprise to no one. He has put in the work and has had his resume is incredibly impressive. And I think that after spending the last half of the season with the Flames, since Dan Vladar was out with surgery, he got a taste of that work ethic that you need at the NHL level. And we've heard players talk about it time and time again, how different it is, even from the AHL. So I think that preparation helps. And then, of course, his already skilled ability, like there's only so much you can say about that. But I do think Matt Coronado as well. He had some problems skating last season, and while he has a fantastic shot, it does seem like he spent a lot of time this summer training with a skating coach, which is nice. We got to refine those skills.
Yes. All right, Jason, you have a plethora of guys to choose from here. Leo Carlson, of course, makes a ton of sense. Cutter Gauthier, who it's going to be his rookie season, played a handful of games, a taste at the. But where are you going? Who is the breakout candidate for the Ducks this season?
As much as I want to say Trevor Zegras, who saw limited action, you ready for a hot take? A really hot take? Cutter Gauthier, 50-point season. Cutter Gauthier is going to be a finalist for the Calder Trophy next season, right along with. You're gonna. I didn't say he'd win it. I said he'd be a finalist along with Macklin Celebrini. That's my hot take there. I think Cutter Gauthier is going to be one of the biggest breakout stars, not just for the Ducks, but of the entire National Hockey League. He has got something to prove, especially after that much talked about trade last season with the Philadelphia Flyers. He's got something more to prove, not just to himself, but to everybody else. And the way he composed himself, the way he's already looked in training camp, rookie faceoff, even last season, etc. He is ready for the big time. He is ready to take over in this league now. So I see him as a Calder finalist. Sorry, JD. But hey, at least I didn't say he'd win it. I didn't go that far because Macklin's very good.
And Will Smith, too. I'm going to go with a guy who's going to be entering his second full season with the San Jose Sharks, and that is my Swedish son, William Eklund. Eklund last year completed his first full season in NHL. In 80 games, he had 45 points. He played the majority of his time last year with Luke Cudden, and he put up 45 points. Now you surround him with other talented players, whether it's Mikael Granlund, Fabian Zetterlund, Will Smith, Celebrini, Tyler Toffoli. I think you're going to see all the skills that made Eklund such an intriguing prospect when he was drafted in the 2021 draft. You're going to see that all on display and actually get the production. I think Eklund is going to have a 70-point season. I think he's going to lead the San Jose Sharks in points this year for a young, exciting team, and this will probably be the only season that Eklund leads the points, the team in points. But I got to give it to him at least one season. So for all of us ride or die Eklund guys. So we will continue looking at all of our teams and kind of deciding what's at stake for the teams if they don't make the playoffs, and kind of who could maybe sneak in from one of our basement teams. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. Today's ad is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And for NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page with while you place your bets. And you get started with a $200 and bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Plus, it's not just NFL season. You can bet on FanDuel's easy-to-use app, of course, as NHL season draws near. They've got plenty of stuff to choose from. You have awards picks, division winners. Give me the Canucks and the Pacific, guys. I think it's the Canucks year. And which team is going to win the whole thing and bring home the Stanley Cup in June? That's FanDuel.com and get $200 in bonus bets when you place a $5 bet. FanDuel, official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, guys. We have a big question here. What happens if your team doesn't make the playoffs? And yes, every team, they're all going to say the same thing on a training camp. Our goal is to make the playoffs. We know realistically, like our teams are in the middle of it, but I think Erica's team is, they were just in the playoffs a couple of years ago, took a big step back this year. Erica, what happens if the Kraken don't make the playoffs? Is this like the end of the world, or is it you have a new coach, new frames, where we got to let this thing build, right?
I really think that if the Seattle Kraken don't make the playoffs, then honestly, something I've been talking about on the show will come to pass, and that's that the changes that were made at the coaching level weren't enough because it wasn't maybe only the coaching that was the issue to begin with. I think you really have to be critical of the front office for the Seattle Kraken. They did make some moves, which are in our very short history, a little bit uncharacteristic. I think they're meeting the moment of kind of the time of free agency, and Ron Francis has talked about that. And I think there are still some question marks. There's some people, there's likely even just some dead weight on the team this year that hasn't been handled, and will likely have to get handled pretty soon so that we are in a good position with the salary cap. So that alone tells me that if this is a team, first of all, even before we get really to playoffs, if this is a team that comes out the gate stumbling, there have to be some moves made with the roster, and then you really have the front office in the hot seat. But if we get to the end of the season and the Seattle Kraken are not in the postseason, I think you really have to see what's going to happen at the top, because that to me is the thing that stands out the most. There's enough talent. There's a very promising coaching staff, but the moves were just not right to get the team where they needed to be.
Jess, Team Tank, choo-choo.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Nothing's at stake. Maybe some tea times and some vacations have to be rearranged. I truly don't think I don't think anyone's job is really on the line here. It is kind of, this is just year 2 post Daryl Sutter and Brad Treliving, who was the general manager for 10 years. So it has just been a huge philosophical shift. And if they don't make the playoffs, that's fine. Things are still going in the right direction.
All right, Jason, I mean, I think for the Ducks, right, it's that time to maybe get out of the basement. Can you become a fun, frisky team where maybe, you're hanging around till the trade deadline and something like that? Is that kind of the goal for the Ducks this year?
Maybe not fun and frisky, maybe more like big and brawling. I mean, you saw that the Butcher was just named the 9th captain of the Anaheim Ducks. This isn't a team that's going to be fun and frisky. This is going to be a team that's going to beat you into submission every single night. That being said, I don't think the question is there anything at stake if they make the playoffs? I think the big question is what's at stake if they wind up in the bottom of the standings. If they see that there's nothing moving the needle, if they somehow wind up worse in points or stay right where they're at, then to Erica's point, I mean, like she said, it's not just coaching. It's not just a new coaching staff. It's about the players themselves. So I think the big question is, can they at least make a market improvement? Can they go from 8th or 7th to 5th or 6th? I think that's going to be one of the biggest question marks, along with what's Trevor Zegras going to do? How's he going to respond to having like a full offseason where he's finally getting healthy? And how are the new guys going to respond with some of the guys kind of leaving? Because that's been the Ducks the last 5 seasons, is they would have guys leaving on expiring contracts on the trade deadline, or in the offseason. They've lost more than they've gained, and they could have spent the money. They didn't. So playoffs aren't at stake here. It's just don't wind up in the cellar is at stake, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think for the Ducks, like I feel like they're that team that like you got to start to see something. You have so many high picks on this team, right? Mason McTavish, Leo Carlson, Cutter Gauthier. You got to start to see something out of this core before you can start to put more assets to try to kind of put them over the edge. So yeah, I think this is a big year for the Ducks to try to figure out what they have there. For the Sharks, there is no expectations to make the playoffs. I think the expectation for the Sharks is just to be competitive more. I mean, there was too many games last year where it's 10-2, 10-1, 7-1 against the Kraken. Like you can't have those types of games, especially with so many young players. And that is the expectation. Mike Greer said it. New head coach Ryan Warsofsky said it. Just be more competitive night in and night out. And this is a team that's going to need to learn how to win because you have so many young guys, and you have some guys that they added, like again, Tyler Toffoli, Barclay Goodrow, guys who won on the biggest stages. But I think for this team, it's just, can you learn to be a 60-minute team, right? Can you play a full 60 minutes instead of just, we see half a game and then this thing falls apart and you give up 3 goals in 5 minutes or something like that. So that's the expectations for the Sharks. So really quickly before we get out of here, who's your pick out of this group? I think we're all probably going to be pretty unanimous. Who ascends up and leaves us next off season, and why is it the Seattle Kraken?
Yeah, I think it's the Kraken. I think that, to your point earlier, JD, I think, and I've said this before, they did arrive a little ahead of schedule. I don't think that they did, they kind of accelerated into the next phase. If anything, it's kind of, again, the front office really being pulled in that direction. But what gives me hope is that Dan Bylsma wants to play fast. He has a handle of what is needed to motivate the young players that, again, are going to be the bloodline of the Seattle Kraken. Him and his staff, they're the right ones to do it. And again, if anything goes wrong, I'm not putting it on the players necessarily, I guess, depending on what we see. But I think generally speaking, it's probably going to be a front office issue. But I'm putting my faith in Disco Dan.
All right, Jess. I mean, right? It's the Kraken or bust for the 4. You're our only hope, Erica.
Yeah.
So I think we're all in agreement there. Someone, if Erica goes up, somebody's going to come down. Who drops out of the top 4? Jason.
I have an answer for that. Sorry to my crosstown rivals, the Los Angeles Kings. I think they are going to not only get out of the top 4, they're going to miss the playoffs altogether. The Kings did not look as impressive as I thought they were going to be this offseason. The Pierre-Luc Dubois experiment has crashed and burned like nobody's business. And I was looking at the Kings roster last night. There's not a whole lot that makes me excited for the Los Angeles Kings. So I feel bad doing this because I have a lot of friends that work in that organization, but I think they're going to be 5th place in the division. I'm sorry. By the way, I have Vegas 4th. I have Vegas 4th.
We can both hate the Kings. Yes.
I have the Kraken 3rd in the division, by the way. Vegas lost a lot this offseason as well. So
yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's the Kings as well. Rob Blake has kind of painted himself into a corner with that roster. They have a lot of contracts to go for a very long time, and they can't really do too much with them. You could also talk me into Vegas, but that's just a hater in me as well. And if you look at the I know Vegas's defense is good. The goaltending, I think, plays above expectations because of the defense in front of them. I know they have Stone and Eichel stuff, but if you look at the left wings, they've lost a lot there. They haven't done a lot to replace them. That you could talk me into them, especially if we know the LTIR bug goes around Vegas at some point in the late winters. So you could talk me to them, but I think it's the Kings, like I said, unless Quentin Byfield turns into the monster superstar that we kind of been waiting for. I'm not impressed with the Kings. I think Rob Blake is on very thin ice here. So that's it from the terrible basement part of the Pacific. There's hope. One day we're going to be at the top, guys. I promise you, we will be at the top one day. And all those, and then those guys can deal with shanking. So thank you guys, of course, for hanging out with us, making this episode of the 2024 Locked On NHL season preview your first listen. For your second listen, catch the rest of the Pacific and every episode of the 2024 Locked On NHL season preview on Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.